McLean. Dead Coach's Corner.
You're listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast with your host, Andy Plymer.
For someone to explain.
Bringing you up-to-date coaching concepts from the world of rugby.
The distinction between these mandatory.
Sharing ideas to make the game better.
Okay, welcome to episode 26 of the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. I'm your host, Andy Plymer. In this episode, I have a great chat with Jake Schuster. Jake is a PhD student who's working on speed training, especially in the area of sevens. And he's currently doing his PhD on speed mechanics and running efficiency with the New Zealand women's sevens team. So he did a bunch of the prep work leading up to the Rio Olympics, and for those, most listeners, if not all, would have watched the final of the women's sevens where the silver medal went to the New Zealand team. So he's been working with a great bunch of athletes, and obviously has a lot to offer coaches out there. So we didn't go into a lot of detail on what his findings were from this study because they were a bit hush leading up to the Olympics. So once they're out of embargo, hopefully we'll get Jake on again maybe and have a chat about that in more detail. What we did go into was a bit of detail, some basic tips for coaches out there who their main goal is just to get their players faster. What are some of the progressions you might need to make? Where do you fit it into the weekly training? Where do you fit it into your actual training session? And some just basic ideas on drills and loading and those kind of things. Great chat with him. Really stoked he came on the show. He's got a huge amount of experience in a pretty short time. He's done some work with Cressey Performance in the US, which is where Jake's from originally. Cressey Performance, for those who don't know, is huge in baseball, strength and conditioning. He spent a lot of time in the Netherlands with their Olympic body there. And also, while studying in the UK, he was also involved heavily with sevens and 15s, strength and conditioning and speed work there. So great chat there with Jake, and hope you enjoy it. And we'll see you on the other side. Cheers. Joined with Jake Schuster. So welcome, Jake.
Andrew, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk rugby with you.
Yeah, no worries. Appreciate you coming on the show, and I know it took us a bit of time to kind of match up the time schedules throughout the world. You're in New Zealand, I'm in Canada, so I appreciate you finding the time.
Well, I try and be nice to anyone over in Canada because everyone there is just far too nice.
Totally agree. That's why I'm still living here. It's awesome. All right, so what's a bit of a brief backstory to kind of what got you to New Zealand, like tracing it back, say, the last kind of 5-10 years? How did you end up there?
Sure. So I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, so in New England, not too far away from where you are now. I competed in wrestling and lacrosse growing up, pretty stereotypical Northeastern sports.
Yeah, for sure.
Went down to Daniel College in Maryland under the tutelage of Dr. Rick Carpenter and Dr. Steve McCall there. I hopped across the pond to finish my undergrad at the Hogeschool University of Amsterdam and interned with the Dutch Olympic Federation there. And that's where I really fell in love with working in elite sport, as a kind of ex-athlete or not quite elite athlete, that's kind of the
like
path
most
of
us.
strength coaches.
Yeah,
Exactly. So that's when I really fell in love with with elite athletic performance and how we can try and get there. So after I did a gap year and a half in Berlin, Germany, staying in Europe, I completed my master's degree at Loughborough University in the UK. That was actually in exercise physiology and nutrition. I've never used that degree, really. I then went and interned with Eric Cressey in Florida, working with pro baseballers.
Oh, awesome, yeah.
And then one day, about 15, 16 months ago, I got a call from a professor I knew here in New Zealand, and he said, "Hey, I've got a scholarship with your name on it. Do you want to come across?" And here I am, finished up with data collection, and more than a year into my time here.
Awesome, cool. So, yeah, we talked a bunch off air about that you're involved with rugby over there and in the sevens role, but that pretty sensitive times as we come up to Rio, so we're not going to touch on a lot of that. Purpose for this episode is really just to kind of look into training rugby players, to be faster. That's your expertise is speed training, and to pass on some of those techniques that you've found over the past few years that might be able to help coaches out there. So, when you start with a new team, what's your first point? What do you do when you get a new group?
I'd like to see them all run as fast as they can.
Yeah.
So I know a ton of movement screens out there and different assessment batteries, and some of them are really good. My boss, Matt Kritz, created the movement competency screen for his own PhD, so there's some good assessments out there for movement, Andrew. I just like to see athletes run as fast as they can. And in fact, I like to watch them play rugby. I think a lot of athletes will run differently in a testing situation than they will in their own sport. So I really like to watch them just play their sport and then kind of take notes on everyone. As I'll say probably a few times, I think there's a key set of things that we're looking for in successful sprinting and successful running. So I just basically watch the athletes run in their sport, hopefully, and look for those things. Then if I have kind of my first session with a group, Andrew, I'll have them run probably a 40 and go one at a time or in small groups and try and do them and just try and look for different things that I'm seeing in each group.
During that time, are you taking notes, or are you videoing, or are you doing both? What kind of how are you looking at each individual athlete and their individual strengths and weaknesses?
Kind of depends on manpower, Andrew. I like to get video ASAP, especially if you can look at it in slow motion with the athletes or with the coaches. But usually I just try and use my eyes so I can communicate with the athletes as I'm seeing them and communicate with the coaches. Normally, if we're just running kind of a first, pre-testing battery, we'll have them run a 40, and I'll use the radar gun, which I used in my PhD, and this will give us the technical components and the force application measurements of their sprinting to kind of confirm or deny or add to what I'm seeing with my own eyes.
Yeah. So what are some of the common errors you're going to see with athletes in their running technique?
So we'll see a couple of things. Excessive head movement is really common.
Yeah, for sure.
Over rotation, whether that's with the arms crossing the midline or with the knees, and you're running almost in a zigzag.
Yeah.
Which is really common in rugby athletes. Many of the fastest rugby players I've ever seen can't run in a straight line.
Yeah.
They just don't know how to do it. So those are probably the two most common, along with understriding, especially in a sport where you're taking chopped steps and just a few steps at a time before going into contact.
Right.
Most rugby athletes won't have experienced the extremely broad, almost bounding-like first three steps, which a sprinter on a track will experience day in, day out.
So is that going to be a link to like their knee lift and how high they're getting their knees up to extend that stride, or?
That's right, and a lot of that comes back to the classic. Two of the best cues I've gotten off Nick Winkelman are just push the ground away, and then picture a pane of glass in front of your knees and smash the glass.
Right. Yeah.
When I get athletes to start just shouting "smash the glass" back to me involuntarily, that's when I know I've had an impact.
That's great.
A lot of these rugby athletes, Andrew, have been told to take short, sharp steps to get up to speed. And I just vehemently disagree with that. I don't think that makes any sense. If you get further away from your opponent, then you are inherently faster.
So out of the blocks, you're saying longer strides are better.
Absolutely. So if you take one long step and you're gone, then you're gone.
Yeah.
Right. Doesn't matter what velocity you're at if you're 3 meters away from an opponent instead of 1 meter.
Yeah, can't argue with that. Yeah, and you mentioned Nick Winkelman there. I follow him on Twitter, and he does some good stuff there. I think he's with the Irish Rugby Union right now, and there's some good stuff there. Okay, so then once you've started working with a group and you've isolated some work-ons for athletes, you're going to be with that group for a period of time. How do you like to, I don't know, for want of a better word, periodize your speed work with that team over the course of a season?
Sure. Well, Andrew, I definitely subscribe to dynamical systems theory and kind of the nonlinear pedagogies that we find people like Franz Bosch using, but also all sorts of researchers in Europe. And I don't necessarily believe in things like progressive overload when it comes to learning how to run fast, because usually rugby athletes will have many of the physical skill sets which they need to run very fast, but they don't have the technical skill sets.
Yeah.
So progressing in terms of skill acquisition is kind of how I approach it. So I almost don't periodize, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
More of how I approach it is to have a specific set of progressions in each drill and each kind of skill set that they need, whether it's multi-directional, crossover step, whatever, and then just let athletes progress individually. So if one athlete is an absolute ninja at lateral A skips and we want to work on some lateral movement in that session, then I might give them a medicine ball to hold or have them hold a stick overhead, whereas if the guy next to them stinks at it, he's not going to be doing that.
No, right, okay.
So it's definitely non-linear learning that I'm looking for them to progress linearly with their skills, but I don't do any undulating programming as I would with.
Okay.
In terms of what I would do when I get a group, Andrew, again, a lot of it comes down to just running as fast as you can. So there's a ton of fancy drills out there. The number one thing that I like to do is have athletes run as fast as they can, because we can't have a perfect world and have them 2-hour-long sessions a week where they're totally fresh and not holding back due to knowing that they're going to get thrashed that afternoon.
Yeah.
But we can take blocks in a session when the athletes are relatively fresh and use what some would call part practice. So we keep it really simple, right? So an A skip would be part practice for the knee drive and the arm swings.
Yeah.
So if we have an athlete do an A skip and we use the 3 or 4 cues that we know that we want to see from them in actual sprinting, and they're able to nail those movements or respond successfully to those cues in the A skip, then we can progress the skill difficulty of that A skip until the movement becomes very robust. So if they can get a knee drive with their arms free, then can they do that knee drive just as well with their arms crossed or with a medicine ball in their hands or their hands overhead?
Right.
Eventually those movements become robust, and we'll see it when they actually sprint.
Right, great. So you're really personalizing it to the athlete rather than doing a kind of broad brushstroke over the whole team.
Yeah, it's completely dependent on feasibility, Andrew. So if you have 3 athletes, that's awesome. If you have 1 athlete, even better, obviously. But if you have 25 athletes in front of you, sometimes you have to, have one drill that you want to work on for 15 minutes, and you have everyone do the basic progression. Then you say you, and you grab a med ball, and you, and you grab a stick.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found that tends to work as long as you're keeping it as simple as possible. I never try and make more than 1 technical change per session. So I don't try and work on knee drive, arm swing, counter rotation, and all those different things in one session.
No, I think that's, and if you look at skills coaching as well with rugby, you can have a coach who will say, every coach knows a lot about catch pass and a lot about tackle and a lot of the key points there, but you can say 7 points, they're all going to get lost. If you can focus on one key point, I think that pedagogically that's pretty robust to be looking at it that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned a few names there. Like if coaches out there wanted some resources to call upon when they, find some techniques that are inconsistent and they want to try and correct them, who are some names that they should go chasing and looking for resources through?
I'm extremely fortunate that I've had some form of professional development or mentorship with Nick Winkelman, Franz Bosch, and Dan Paff, and I think you'd be hard stretched to find 3 better names in the field in this area.
Yeah.
I can't say that much of that learning has been from any materials from them. Obviously, I've read Franz's book. I've done I think it's called the 0.1 second difference from Winkelman on the old XS educational sites. It's a fantastic resource. But a lot of it's been from in-person PD and just learning from them and sending them a video and saying, hey, what do you think of this? Other people that folks might not necessarily know about who I think are really switched on about speed. Dave Wildash with the Hurricanes of Super Rugby.
Yep.
Will Markwick with the Western Force. Kier Wenham-Flat, rugby strength himself, is really switched on in this area. So his Instagram is a very good resource.
Yeah, he's got some great stuff out there, and and he's not afraid to share it as well. So definitely follow him on Twitter, and he's been on the show a couple of times, and he's more than happy to share. So that's great. Now I think coaches, there's got to be local resources they can tap into as well. Like every town's got to have someone who's a sprint coach or an athletics club or something like that, and those coaches want to get better as coaches as well. So if they cross over to another sport and as a resource, surely you can tap into them.
That's a really good point, Andrew. I always say, like, the stopwatch sports, the so-called stopwatch sports are great resources for speed and power development, because those guys, they don't have time to think or a need to think about a ball or defenses or anything like that. So they really hone their craft in these areas. So yeah, actually, I'd just say go find your local athletics coach and have him run some sessions.
Yeah, for sure. Great. Well, you mentioned the ball in hand there. What is, like, obviously with speed coaching, a lot of people will start without the ball in hand, but not most of the time, but a lot of the time when you're running as fast as you can, you're either tracking a defender or you're trying to beat a defender. What are some of the mechanical differences you see with sprinting at top speed with ball in hand, and as a coach, how do you accommodate for those?
I think one of the first things you'll notice if you take an athlete who holds a ball in the attacking part of their sport and have them run without a ball as fast as they can, is that their arms are a mess, whether that's basketball, AFL, rugby, or American football. They almost don't know how to run without their arms because they're used to holding a ball.
Yeah, right.
So one of the things which Franz Bosch has taught me is that if you teach an athlete to run without their arms, more or less what that means, with ball in hand, arms crossed, arms overhead, what have you, then their legs will self-organize. Otherwise, they'll fall over or just look like an idiot. So if you teach an athlete to run without their arms, they will get better at using their legs. In terms of the actual teaching and coaching pedagogies around having a ball, I try and put a ball into every session that I do. Obviously, it depends on the coach that's involved and how okay he is with me running stuff like that. But I mean, my favorite drill is just to have an athlete with a ball on the ground and a defender 2 steps behind them, and when you say go, that attacker picks the ball up and runs and tries to score a try. So usually it's from the 22, it's just basically a 22-meter sprint with a ball in hand, and they start with picking it up from the ground. And that not only allows one athlete to have the psychology of chasing someone, the other athlete the psychology of running away from someone with a ball in hand, but it also it works on something that we call the stumble reflex, which is just when you pick the ball up off the ground, you're in a traditional accelerated body lean, and you have to power through the ground with a long step. Otherwise, you'll stumble or fall over.
Yeah, and it's a bit more like implicit learning there. Like it's
exactly.
Like you say, it's self-organizing. It's okay if I lean too far forward, I'm going to fall over. If I stand up, I'm going to be slower. So a lot of your work you've been doing has been with female athletes. What are some of the differences in the run mechanics that you found coaching female athletes, or is it more that each athlete, whether male or female, has their own strengths and work-ons that you see?
They are pretty different. I'll say first and foremost, what these morphological differences mean in terms of how we should coach them, I'm still not sure. But women and men definitely run differently. The first thing you notice is that a valgus knee position is much more likely and common in a female because of the shape of the hips and the femur angle that creates. So you'll get a lot more side-to-side pushing in female athletes.
Yeah.
The even bigger difference that I noticed, Andrew, is women proportionally naturally have more lower body mass and less upper body mass. So when we talk about throwing our arms and using our arm swing and the propulsion and momentum, the role that your arms play, women have a lot less muscle mass to throw around. If you're changing direction and you swing your arm in the direction that you're about to go, it's a lot more impactful for a man than for a woman. So women, I think, rely on morphologically powering through the ground and using their feet, using their legs, and using their lower body power than men do. Men can switch directions with a great arm swing, with great posture. Women really rely on proper leg mechanics more.
So is that something as a strength coach that you could tap into in the weight room, or is it more that you just rely on your big rocks, that your key lifts that every athlete needs and go from there?
Yeah, I wouldn't pretend to have a great understanding of it, Andrew, beyond what I've just said. So I think it's just something to be aware of and something to keep an eye out for when you're coaching posture and coaching knee position and coaching arm mechanics, especially, to be aware of that men they're going to need to shore up their arm movements a lot more because that's going to affect their momentum more. Whereas women, a valgus knee position in the change of direction will be more impactful than it will for a man.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. So for the amateur coach out there, I'm thinking like most club rugby guys and girls who are coaching, they've got maybe themselves as a head coach, and if they're lucky, an assistant coach in clubland. But often there's two people. There are a lot of kind of jack of all trades kind of coaches out there who have to do the skill work, have to do the set piece work, and have to do the fitness work and have to do the speed work. What would you advise them on in terms of when to get your players running fast, what time of the week, when in the session, all those kind of, I suppose, basic things that you'd learn going through doing a strength and conditioning degree at university?
Sure. So, Andrew, I don't think we have a good idea of an answer within our field. I think there's lots of different ideas, lots of different ways that people like to do it. I don't know if we have a great answer. I can say that the physiology and my experience tells me that I think the fresher an athlete is, the more transfer we'll get from speed training into sport. So if it can be not even necessarily in the morning, but just as the first real action of the day, a first real lower body demanding action of the day. I guess earlier in the week you'll get more, but you might have more transfer directly into gameplay if you do it later in the week. So I don't think we have a good answer there. I'd just say if you can speed train athletes when they're fresh, I think you'll get the most motor learning out of it. If you practice when you're tired first, you won't get as much out of it. I think we need to learn the skills fresh so that they really transfer, and then we can practice them under fatigue.
Yeah. So that's a tough one because some will say like earlier in the week because of central nervous system recovery, but others might say later in the week because it'll transfer into your game on the Saturday. So
exactly,
it's a bit of a lottery. Yeah. So
what I would say, if I can try and answer, Andrew, to the people who don't have a ton of resources and are just trying to figure out, right, how can I make my athletes faster, if that's okay. Because honestly, I would call upon the local track and field coaches to come in and teach some mechanics. And as soon as you've got a good grasp on what those mechanics are and how you want to coach them and how you want to cue your athletes, honestly, just having them run fresh a couple of times a week is as good as it gets. I really think we can do all the fancy drills in the world, running 3 to 5 totally fresh, so 4 minutes rest, 40-meter all-out sprints twice a week is as good of a stimulus as you will ever find for enhancing speed. Really, I think if teams just went out and did that, they'd see a huge difference right away without even coaching mechanics. And to keep that from getting too boring, you can make them races. You go in pairs. You can have them chasing. Start one athlete, 3 steps behind the other. Gamify it, but all-out sprinting it is still the best physical stimulus on the ball.
When in doubt, forwards versus backs is always a good one too.
Yeah,
that gets them fired up. All right, beauty. Just again with the grassroots kind of coach in mind. What would be probably 3 key things you'd advise coaches to think about before just getting their athletes out there and running them into the ground? What would be a couple of key pointers that you'd say, think about these before you plan your session?
I would say know the role of ego and psychology in speed in sports. So the reason I wanted to do a PhD in speed in rugby sevens is because I wanted to tear my hair out every time I watched sevens that I'd see teams kick the ball to the wing and the winger take a look, not fancy it, bring the ball back inside and say, what is the point of having a winger? Back yourself. Run.
Absolutely.
And I said, if every winger in the world just backed themselves and just said, screw it, peace out, every time they got the ball out there, and hit the go button, then the sport of sevens would be that much more entertaining. And I just found that people who are wingers are fast. They have the toolkit. So if we can teach them to become a little bit confident in their speed, then we will see a turnaround. So I don't think we're going to make these massive physiological changes. We might make some motor control changes, but if we can just make them feel like, yeah, I've been working on my speed and now I feel good about it, then we'll see the difference out there. If they back themselves to beat a defender, then they're faster. That's it.
Yeah.
So I know it's kind of one answer rather than three.
That's all.
But I think that's the primary thing that I would want coaches to think about is that, it's not unlike anything in the weight room, Andrew. You don't have to get crazy fancy, make all these different changes. If we make the athlete feel better about their body and the way that they feel out there on the pitch, then we've accomplished our mission.
Yeah, and I think coaches know it themselves from their playing days. There's some days, especially if you were a back, there's some days you're at practice and you just feel fast on that day, and yeah, it gives you a boost for sure. And that's a really good point. That's probably an underestimated thing that coaches don't think a lot about or maybe don't it's more the X's and the O's, the technical stuff. Is that the ability to affect an athlete psychologically can be as powerful, if not more powerful, than the technical abilities you're passing on to them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, so if I was to give you 3 points brief, Andrew, it would be that. So consider the psychology and the ego element. It would be don't overthink it or overcomplicate it. The best stimulus for sprinting is sprinting.
Yep.
And then thirdly, we work under fatigue a whole lot, and we wear our athletes down a lot, and we run a lot of yo-yos or broncos or whatever. But honestly, if we're in a sport or being able to run as fast as you can very well is a key performance indicator.
Yeah.
Let's practice running as fast as we can.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's great. Well, before we wrap up, as an American, you must be pretty excited as the upcoming Olympics with the sevens. A couple of really fast dudes in that men's side, Perry Baker and Carla Niles. You got to have been watching them over the past few years.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's going to change the way people look at the Olympic events. The sevens. I'm not. Full disclosure here. I'm not a huge sevens fan. I'm more of a traditional 15s fan, but I think in terms of an Olympic sport, it's a perfect fit, and I think it's going to blow people's minds, especially those who have never seen it before. I think it's going to be huge.
Yeah, I agree completely. I'd rather watch an All Blacks Test match than a sevens tournament, but I'd rather coach sevens always because I just think it's so fun.
Yeah.
So I think to the traditional fan, especially your North Americans with our short attention spans, it is just about perfect, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. Well, we always finish off the show with the same 4 final questions. When you were a kid growing up, you're not from a rugby background, but when you were a kid growing up, who was your favourite athlete that you liked watching?
It's funny because I never played soccer, but Thierry Henry was my favorite athlete growing up.
Yeah.
He was just an electric striker for Arsenal.
For sure.
Because of his grace, his panache, and just his willingness to try different stuff. It was pretty unique.
Yeah, absolutely. I lived in East London for 3 years, right when Arsenal were at that magic moment with guys like him and
Bergkamp,
Patrick Vieira, Overmars, and all the Tony Adams and the English contingent, and Thierry Henry was amazing. And yeah, I can't talk about soccer too much because I've got a reputation to keep about being a rugby coach. But that was a pretty special era for Arsenal there for sure. Cool. Yes. All right. And what about now? You're fully involved in rugby now as a coach. Well, who's your favourite rugby player going around now?
So when I first showed up in New Zealand, Damien McKenzie really stood out to me, and I'm pretty happy that when I sat down and watched my first match last year, over a year ago, and said, yeah, he's going to be an All Black next year. He's going to be the best player in Super Rugby next year, and I was right. And he's like exactly my size. It's ridiculous. He's tiny.
I was just about to say that. It's unreal. Like, he's what, 75 kilos, but the way he moves is outstanding.
It's crazy. Yeah, just the way he plays the game. And then current favorites and the setups. Yeah, just I love the way Kurt Baker plays the game. Teddy Stanaway is going to take Rio by storm. And on the women's side, Renee Wycliffe and Gail Broughton are electric X factors that will definitely provide some entertainment out there.
Yeah, great. Can't wait to see it. And I think it's going to be both in the men's and women's sevens, it's going to be awesome. Like, in the women's side, Australia, New Zealand, Canada are just going to be going at it for that gold medal. I just think it's going to be a great spectacle. All right, great. And third question: who's a high level coach that you admire that you get a lot of inspiration out of?
I think it's impossible to look past Eddie Jones, isn't it?
Unfortunately, yes.
You know what, man? I think it's amazing that he is what every coach should be in so many different ways in terms of his communication methods, his humility, his self-education. But because almost no one else is like that, he stands out.
Okay, and and then final question: who's a lesser known coach without that kind of profile, or a grassroots coach that they feel deserves a shout out for the work they do?
Sure. So I'll give a shout out to Corey Sweeney. Corey is regional coordinator for New Zealand Sevens, men and women, and has coaching roles in the Bay of Plenty here and all sorts of other stuff. And Corey's just a world-class operator as a rugby coach, as a communicator, as a human being. I think any rugby team in the world would get better with him on staff.
Awesome. That's good to hear. And it's often those people in the background that produce or help produce. They play a key role in producing quality athletes that then go on to the bigger stage that the more high profile coaches get to work with. So yeah, hats off to those guys for sure. All right, Jake. Well, really appreciate you giving up your time to come on the show. I'm really confident that coaches out there who are wanting to get their players faster have gotten a bunch out of this show, and great for you to give up your time, and really appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, I love rugby, so I'm thrilled if I can provide value to rugby coaches out there. Thanks for your time, Andrew, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review via iTunes and keep listening for the next episode. You can also follow us on Twitter at RugbyCoachSCNR or via the website at therugbycoachescorner.com. Until next time, keep sharing ideas to make the game better.